Welcome to Overwatch. This time I'll be talking about my general beta impressions after 2 days of playing the beta. So I've had it in my hands for a little while. I've been playing a lot on stream and I've been playing a lot off stream as well. I do sometimes spend time just playing around, having a mess about, and seeing how it goes. And this is just going to be my general impressions after those 2 days. These are my thoughts and reactions right now after probably about 20 hours of gameplay, so I think I've been playing it a lot. And as someone who understood a lot about the game coming in, I have a lot of expectations for the game, and the first thing we should do is probably contrast those expectations and the reality. I will be going through every hero specifically, very briefly in this video, but this is just, this is just for the general feel of things. And generally my expectations kind of lined up. I had an excellent game with Jason Kaplan and some of his people, and they met up with some of my people, so I have 2 friends in the beta with me, Saf and Ray. People on the stream have already seen them around. And we basically played a very high coordinated game, and Jason actually has it uploaded on YouTube. I'll put a link to it somewhere so you can go check that out. And we basically used the in-game voice communication, and we had a real shutout defense, and we just worked together, coordinated, made everything work, and it was super fun to do so. The in-game voice works superbly at the moment. It's pretty damn fine. I wish there were just more configuration options for it, so you could adjust volume and set what default device you're using, that kind of thing, but it works pretty well. The sound quality is crisp, it's nice and responsive, it's easy to use. Yeah, it's pretty damn good. Otherwise, the game plays fantastically. As someone who played it like almost a year ago now, back in February, it still plays just as smooth, if not smoother, and it just handles super well. I've played finished games that handle worse than this. There's no lag issues that I've seen, there's no issues with responsiveness, everything feels tight, everything feels good. The movement feels responsive, you can move around properly, you can get around the maps easily. Stuff like Widowmaker's grappling hook feels nice and intuitive. It's all very crisp, clean, the kind of quality you'd expect out of Blizzard. In general, the map balance is kind of interesting at the moment. Right now, I'd say on most maps, defenders have it easiest. I'd say on Dorado is probably the hardest assault to do. That might just be inexperience with the map, that might just be people not knowing. But that's kind of what I expected anyway, simply because defending is easier to learn than attacking. When you're attacking, you sort of have to learn where the defender's going to set up and how to break that, and there's a method that goes into that that will develop over time. I will be going over my beta predictions video, but as it's only been 2 days, people are still feeling those out, but seeing as they're meant to be very quick responses, that will happen after about a week. If there's things that I feel could be improved, my friend Saf had a very good point, and I agree with it 100%. Saf is someone who plays support characters a lot, and when playing as Mercy, he ran into the problem where he was healing me as Zarya, and Zarya has 200 health and 200 shields, but you can only heal the health. So you'll see the hit point bar fill up to halfway and then stop for no reason, and you can't see that it's shields that are missing as Mercy. You can't see that quickly. So what would be nice if there was like a transparent blue or something on the health point bar so that you could see when you are just healing nothing anymore. They are full on health and armor, but their shields need to regenerate. So that would be a nice quality of life improvement for that. Other minor niggles that I've had, one of them is, as Widowmaker, it feels like my mouse sensitivity is too low when I'm scoped in. It feels like that's an independent sensitivity to sensitivity in general. So that could be changed, or I don't know. Also, I would love it if there was an option so that I could toggle instead of hold down the scope. And in most games I use a toggle rather than holding down. That's just what I favour personally. I also want to just very briefly address how the beta was handled and how it was handed out. There was some miscommunication, I think, from the Blizzard CS Twitter, which basically said that, everybody has the same chance as streamers and content creators do, and that's, not true. That's unfortunate that happened. Blizzard CS isn't technically like the Overwatch community managers, so I kind of understand how that miscommunication happened. And I do understand that there's a lot of people out there who feel like they've been mistreated, but I will say that most people in there are randoms. I do occasionally run into other streamers and other content creators. I saw Trollden, I saw Jason Kaplan, I've met AlphaCast a few times, I've seen a few other of the EU people. I imagine on the US servers it's probably even crazier because there's a lot more US streamers and content creators. And just in the first wave, I know there's a lot of content creators in there, but they just probably wanted to get us all in at once. From now on, it's probably just going to be randoms and a few others who probably were quote-unquote missed in the first wave. But I just ask that we remain civil, if you get what I mean. The subreddit's been especially hostile lately, And I just hope it simmers down fairly soon and we can go back to being a productive and welcoming community. To co-opt a terrible meme, you aren't being the hero that Tracer would expect you to be. But give it time, and hopefully the open weekend will get a bunch of you guys in. I know that it's hard to wait and watch, but that's all you can do, unfortunately. And I wish you the best of luck when beta invites do go out. I do hope to see some of you in there. It is really nice. I do sometimes get recognized. I do sometimes get people saying, hey, that's Ohm. And if you are in the beta, you know, and you do see me, just say hey. I'll be happy to say hello back, and then shoot you in the head. Good times. Otherwise, let's talk about individual heroes. So let's begin with the Assault. So Tracer I have a lot of fun playing. Tracer is incredibly strong in some ways and incredibly weak in others. She has very clear strengths and weaknesses, just like you would expect. Basically, if she is shot by anything, you must instantly rewind. You cannot afford to take 2 hits from just about anything. Now, of course, that doesn't mean, you know, you can't take 2 hits from Soldier 76 Assault Rifle, but if he lands 2 bursts on you, you're probably going to die. So managing that reflex and getting that reflex trained where you take damage and you just rewind immediately is something that's going to be important when you're learning Tracer. Then you can start sort of figuring out, okay, did I really need to rewind then? How long can I hold it for? And start playing around with that. That's about where I am with Tracer right now. I'm also fairly bad at landing the pulse bomb where I need it to be. It's actually surprisingly difficult to throw that onto the right target, and getting used to doing that is going to take some practice. McCree is pretty damn good. I've seen some really good McCrees, some really bad McCrees. He's a very bipolar character. He's probably the strongest, like I said in the analysis video, definitely the strongest duelist in the game. He can bust tanks like nobody's business because tanks mostly want to get into his face. You throw the flashbang, you do the fan shot, roll fan shot, and they will go down real fast. Fighting McCree in close range is just a no-no for pretty much everybody. You've got to be super careful, and Deadeye is actually surprisingly effective. I've seen it land a few times. It's not going to like multi-kill a lot of people, but it will generally get some damage onto people or get 1 or 2 kills. One surprising thing about Deadeye is how long it lasts, so you can think it's safe and then you poke your head out and then bang, McCree's blown it off. Soldier 76 is at the moment very popular just because he's so basic and he can fit into every single team comp pretty easily and pretty much straightforwardly. He's pretty much what you'd expect, very bread and butter. The Helix rockets are super important, and learning how to use those efficiently is really vital to his kit. What's interesting is Blizzard do have bots in the game, although so far I've only seen the Soldier 76 one when testing it out on hard difficulty, and that thing is a frickin' aim bot, and then you can start to see how dangerous Soldier 76 is. His ultimate is actually weaker than you'd expect. It's incredibly easy to counter like most ultimates. If you just have like a Reinhardt or something, he can't do anything about it. Otherwise you just have to be careful, you can pull back. There's very clear noises when you use it. There's even a clear noise where you can tell the duration of his ultimate and when it's run out. So you know when it's safe to move and when it's safe to fight. And you can try, and for some characters you can try and duel him when he's got that on. He will just win a straight damage race quite often because he's more accurate than you. But if you land a few lucky grenades as Junkrat or something, you will just blow him away. So it's very manageable, it's very deal-withable. Farah has actually exceeded my expectations. I thought she would be a lot weaker than she is. The rockets deal more damage than I expected, especially when they land directly, and there's more people in the beta than I expected who can land those rockets directly. A good Farah is incredibly dangerous. Her ultimate is what you would expect. It's very bipolar. It can clear entire games, it can just die immediately, and quite often it does. But just the threat of the ultimate is usually enough to make her a considerable threat, and if you do manage to land, if you do get into a good position and fire it off from a good angle, you will just murder people. So far better than I expected. And people seem to have taken a shining to her, although there still are, quite a lot of bad Farahs around at the same time, but, what can you expect? It's early days in beta. She's difficult to use. And finally for the assaults, Reaper. Reaper is interesting. He's more frustrating than I thought he would be. Wraith form is a real pain in the ass, and it means he can get anywhere he needs to be. Also, he suffers a lot less from the use ult and die syndrome than I thought he would, which is, Farah's hallmark at the moment. Otherwise, yep, he's just very meaty in close range combat. He's incredibly strong if you get a flank. I've had a few good sprees where, you get a flank, you pick one person off, you use that person to heal, and then you just can keep fighting and fighting and fighting. It makes him surprisingly tanky, surprisingly difficult to kill. He can also disengage very reliably with his Wraith form and just slip away, so that's pretty cool. The Shadow Step is also very easy to use. I've seen people try and use it in combat. Please, for the love of God, don't do that. But otherwise, it's incredibly good for getting around. It makes it very difficult to predict where Reaper's going to come from, and makes him a really good fighter. Next up we have defense, and let's begin with my girl Widowmaker. Widowmaker is a hero I haven't played actually as much as I would like, partially because he's very situational and I like to try and fit the team, and partially because I've been streaming and I'm aware that sniping isn't the most exciting thing in the world, especially because I'm a little bit rusty. I need to practice. The mouse sensitivity, as I said before, when you're scoped in feels a little bit slow, so I'm getting used to that still. I'm also getting used to the hitboxes and heads on the various characters. The heads are actually quite small in this game, so hitting them is a little bit tricky. She is quite powerful, however, with the ability to deal a high damage body shot and then follow it up pretty much immediately with some low damage ones. Makes her incredibly threatening and makes her sniping very effective. She's also surprisingly effective in melee combat when you're very close up to someone. Her assault rifle isn't necessarily weaker than most people's weapons. It's just that she has a lack of in-combat abilities. What I've actually found is when you're dueling in close, you just try and engage, do what damage you can, throw a Widow Mine, and then use the zip line to confuse your enemy, to, go somewhere they're not expecting, and let the Widow Mine deal a little bit of damage, that your assault rifle deals some damage, and try and sort of outmatch them like that. Then use the melee hit, of course, for a little bit of extra kick. Next up is Torbjorn. Torbjorn's in an interesting place right now. He's actually more powerful than I thought he would be. His turret right now is something I could talk about endlessly, and I've threatened to do so in the past. People wanted me to do that, so I might do at some point soon. But I basically, for example, and I'll probably show it on the screen right now, if it's very grainy stream footage you could probably tell, but I basically had a game where I was playing Torbjorn, stood in a brush, and I was just repairing my turret all game. It was very exciting to watch, I'm sure. And I basically stalled out the entire enemy team with a level 3 turret. They had a real hard time dealing with it. I think people still need to learn the counters to how to deal with the turret and, get a Reinhardt in front and get a lot of burst damage on the turret, but it's incredibly tanky, and it's very difficult to burst that, especially with Molten Core active. You just can't beat his repairing it. Otherwise, he's very mediocre in combat, mediocre to bad. It's surprisingly high damage with his right click if you can get close to people, but if you're close to people they can probably kill you, so you just have to be careful. One worry I have with Torbjorn, is a worry I've got going forward, is that it's easier to build ultimate than it is to collect scrap. So there might be just more incentive to just sit and wait for your ultimate to charge, and then use that to trigger Molten Core, and use that to get armor packs and get the turret upgraded. So there's no real incentive to go and get scrap. We'll see. Bastion. Bastion's an interesting fellow. First video I might make is people are bad at Bastion. And what I mean by that is people are bad at fighting Bastion. I very seldom have trouble breaking him. We did have one game where they had two Bastions at the end point of Numbani, which is got a lot of very open spaces. Basically it's two open corridors in an L shape. And they had two Bastions then, and we had a real hard time breaking that. We did have options that could deal with it. Some of them didn't occur to me at the time. Winston could have done it. Reaper could have done it probably better as well. Hanzo could have done it, and we'll come to Hanzo very soon. Tracer had some trouble dealing with it just because they had so many people defending that single location. It was difficult to get behind them and break them. Otherwise, Bastion is just incredibly strong. He's very good at tunneling down. He has very clear strengths and weaknesses. He's pretty clear-cut and obvious in his strengths and weaknesses. And it shouldn't be a too big surprise that he's good at holding down a single corridor, pathway, or location. What I found interesting is looking for spots where you have two entrances and they're about 90 degrees apart. And then you just aim 45 degrees between them, and you can switch between both. And it's finding the spaces and finding the angles to position yourself at that's kind of part of the fun with Bastion. Hanzo I'll probably actually make a video on fairly soon because he is surprisingly fun. I've got surprisingly good at Hanzo so far, and I'm getting better constantly. Hanzo has a very interesting playstyle. His ultimate is pretty good, it's better than I thought it would be, but it's more situational. It's not going to completely own face, and if they can just move out of it, then they will. But for example, if you're capturing a point and the enemy team is running back to try and knock you off it, you just fire the dragon towards them and then they're screwed. If they stand in it, they die. If they dodge away, they lose the point. And you can force people into no-win situations like that. You can also use it very easily at the start of a push. You'd sort of clear a corridor as people run and flee to get out of the way. So it's a great zoning tool, more than a kill everyone tool. Otherwise, he's a very complicated character. The sonic arrow is ridiculously important to playing him well. I'll probably do like I said, I'll probably do a video on Hanzo later, just to really get elbows deep into that character. Junkrat, you've probably already seen the Junkrat video I have on my channel. He's pretty damn strong. He's probably one of the strongest characters in the game in the right hands, and that's okay actually, because the thing with Junkrat is most people have bad instincts against him. The way you beat a Junkrat is you've got to get into that sort of sweet spot where it's very difficult for him to land his grenades. If you get too close to him, then he can just, you know, nuzzle up to your face and blow you both up. But if you get too far away, then he's just going to bounce grenades all over the place and probably take you out like that. The concussion mine is incredibly useful and very strong. And the bear traps are surprisingly good in combat. What I've noticed is you just throw them down in combat, people tend not to notice that, and then they'll just step in them and give you a free grenade shot, and that's usually enough to win the fight. Otherwise, killing him isn't that hard. He's very squishy. He is incredibly mobile, however, so you just got to be careful where he's coming from. Supports. Mercy. Incredibly fun. It's, right now, to me, the real skill of Mercy is knowing when to swap to damage amps and when to swap to healing. My friend Saf plays supports way more than I do, and that was basically Saf's feedback, that Saf felt like he couldn't stop healing. He just had to keep healing everyone up and couldn't really find time and space to damage amp. I imagine that's going to come with practice. You know, when can I stop healing this person, let them soak up some damage with their health and just give them the damage to fight back. I have had a few mercies also like damage amp me when I'm playing Hanzo or Widowmaker, for example, and that's been incredibly strong. She's super fun to play. Flying through your teammates and bouncing around off people is super cool. So cool to play as. She's probably my favourite of the support classes. And is just, yeah, a blast to play. I really do like Mercy. She's also super cute with the wave emote. Symmetra. Saf is a quote-unquote Symmetra main, and will be probably playing Symmetra very frequently in the coming days. And I'm just going to sort of parrot Saf here. Symmetra is very strong if you have time to set up, and if you set up a lot of turrets. The turrets basically have one hit point, however, so if someone so much as looks at them, they're going to die. But they serve as a nice distraction, so what tends to happen is you're fighting someone else, and there's a Symmetra turret on you. That's going to slow you down, make it difficult to fight. You're going to take damage on the way, and yeah, it's just like a distraction thing. Teleporter is so good on a number of maps, especially on the first point on a lot of maps, and for attacking on the last point. So that's really nice to get going, and when you manage to get one of those up, the difference is huge. Otherwise, quality of life things for Symmetra, putting shields on everyone in the setup time is a little bit frustrating, a little bit slow and a little bit annoying. Hopefully they can do something with that. And Symmetra's biggest weakness right now is when you fall on the back foot and you lose all your turrets, for example, it's very difficult to start setting them up again because you'll be constantly relocating and people will just pick them off and they don't regenerate that quickly. So it's kind of hard to get set up once again when you start falling behind. Next up is Lucio. Lucio is incredibly fun. He really feels good to play. And getting used to like swapping songs and using Amp It Up correctly takes a little bit of time, but when you do, he feels great. Lucio is versatile as well. He deals a surprising amount of damage. The best way I've found to deal damage with Lucio is when you're firing your shots, you fire a burst of 4. And the best thing to do, I find, is just draw a small horizontal line across the target because the projectiles travel slowly. That guarantees that you're firing like a wave out, and that makes it very difficult for the enemy to dodge. And when you land a few of those in a row, you'll get kills. The speed up is incredibly noticeable and has made for some really fast pushes and like breakneck assaults where you'll just speed through the enemy team, get to the point, cap it and win. And that's great when that happens. His ultimate is really decisive, really powerful, not quite as powerful as I suspected actually. But yeah, it's really good, really useful, has made some final pushes, for example, really easy, has saved a lot of lives, and it's just a good ultimate all round. And Zenyatta. Zenyatta is probably my least favourite character. I do know that some people really like him. I have seen some really good Zenyatas. The thing with Zenyatta is he's very passive to me. You don't get to actually do much. You can put a heal on someone, and you can put an orb of discord on someone, and then you're just basically consigned to standing in the back and plicking away with your balls. And some people might enjoy that very commander style play, but to me I like being more involved in the action, so I haven't played much Zenyatta. I don't like him that much. But we'll see, maybe I'll come around to him. His ultimate is incredibly powerful. Again, it's similar to Lucio's in that it makes a push incredibly strong. I've also seen it where Zenyatta has managed to stall a capture because he's got his ultimate on and he's immortal and you can't stop that. So he'll just come in and he'll soak things up with that and use it as a sort of defensive cooldown. And that's really cool when that happens. And finally the tanks. Let's start with Winston. Winston's probably my least favourite of the tanks. He is fun to play, you just sort of jump around and be really annoying and then jump out. But I prefer having a little bit more power. His ultimate is really nasty though. It feels pretty damn good when you use it and just start punching people around. It is a little bit difficult to keep track of where people are at times as Winston, but yeah. Also his weapon feels very short range, a little more short range than you'd expect, but that's just a getting used to it kind of thing. I've seen fewer Winstons than I have seen Reinhardts, Zaryas and Roadhogs, certainly. Reinhardt is probably, I'll still say he's my second favourite tank. Reinhardt is very fun though, he's more powerful than I thought he would be. The key to playing as Reinhardt that I've discovered so far is that you don't focus on trying to hammer people, focus on trying to set yourself up for a charge, because the charge will one-shot most people, and that's really nasty. The amount of times I've landed a good charge on someone and just wiped them out is, you know, incredibly numerous. And that sets you up in a good location as well. Even if they survive, you can just sort of club them around the head a few times and they'll go down. Reinhardt is a beast in close range, as you would expect. Otherwise, he's just incredibly strong for the team. It's very difficult to break his shield. That said, you know, when you get behind him, when he has two threats to deal with and they're on either side, Reinhardt basically becomes a pushover because he's stuck with his melee range. The fire strike is useful, but it's not great. And as a result, it's very easy to sort of flank him, and then when you do that, he'll just drop like a ton of bricks. My favourite tank is Zarya, and that's not too surprising. I like playing assaulty characters, and Zarya is a very assaulty character. Zarya is also just very satisfying in my opinion. The key to understanding Zarya is to understand her damage, and her damage is very bipolar. When you have a low percentage, then you're not going to be doing much damage, you're not going to be doing much hurt. When you're on a high percentage, you're going to be killing the hell out of everything. So trying to get that bar max should be your priority. The way you do that is you look for favourable fights. You look for people who don't deal much damage. You look for, like, Winston, for example. You know, you look for a Roadhog trying to fight at range. You look for a Reaper trying to fight at range. And you use your barrier, and then you just charge yourself up, and then you try and get in close and deal a huge amount of damage. The one criticism of Zarya I would have at the moment is that her beam, the constant beam, feels very weak, even when you're on high charge. It feels like it's constantly better to just use the right click, and I'm not sure that's intentional. I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. And last but not least is Roadhog. Roadhog is a ton of fun, but Roadhog has a number of large weaknesses. He's fairly durable, although if you get some focus fire on him, he will go down. Most of the other tanks have like an emergency button they can press. They can deploy a shield or some form and just tank longer. Roadhog has to try and self-heal, and that's not going to work if you're taking damage from 3 sources at once. So yeah. Otherwise, he's incredibly meaty, deals a huge amount of damage. Anyone you get in your hook is probably going to die, even other tanks. And you can use him very offensively and use him to sort of pick people out and try and take people down, get stuns on people using ultimates, that kind of thing. He's very strong in that regard and very satisfying when you land the hook and left click and blow someone away. Again, these are just like mile a minute general impressions, but those are my 1, 2, 3 sentence impressions of everyone so far in the beta. As this video has run for about 20 minutes now, I'll call it there. In future, I have set up an Ask FM. I'll put a link to it in the description. I'll put the URL on the screen. If you want to put questions on that, I will try and answer them there, and I'll try and answer them in a video later. I've also taken a number of questions from the beta predictions video I put up. Some people put questions in those comments, so I have taken a note of them as well. I will be doing a mailbag, and I'll probably do that on Friday evening, so it'll probably be up on Saturday. Otherwise, I hope you join me on the stream sometime. We're having a blast. The chat has been amazing so far, and it's come up with all sorts of bullshit to spam when plays of the game happen, which is wonderful. And it's been a really constructive chat as well, so I've been super happy with that. I hope you do stop by and join me as we play Overwatch. Otherwise, thanks for watching to the end. This has been my initial beta commentary, I suppose, and I'll be doing more focused content in the near future. Right now, I just want to play the game a shitload, get familiar as possible, and understand the game as best I can to provide you guys with the best information I can. Toodles.